This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game, shifting a little money here, a little there, hoping it all works out? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can be a better budgeter and potentially lower your insurance bill too. You tell Progressive what you want to pay for car insurance. They'll help you find options within your budget. Try it today at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
Is your cold making it hard for you to get to sleep and leading to a bad morning? Switch to Mucinex Night Shift for fast, powerful, nighttime multi-symptom cold and flu relief. Mucinex Night Shift fights your worst nighttime symptoms to help you get to sleep and wake up ready to go. Mucinex Night Shift. It's comeback season. Use as directed.
Linda Greenhouse is one of those journalists that it's hard to know how to describe. Do you mention her Pulitzer Prize first? Her years teaching at Yale Law School? For this conversation, what you really need to know is that she covers the federal courts, and especially abortion.
Yes, I first wrote about abortion for the New York Times. I'm embarrassed to say how long ago because it makes me sound as old as I am, but it was 1969.
So you've really watched the abortion landscape change in this country.
Oh my gosh. I mean, in June of 2022, when the court decided Dobbs and overturned Roe against Wade, I had this image of my entire adult life kind of passing before my eyes, because that first article that I just referenced, it was in the New York Times Magazine. I was a baby reporter. And the headline on it was, "Is there a constitutional right to abortion?" So I was kind of there very closely at the beginning, and now here I am at the end. It's kind of unnerving, actually.
I called Linda up because I was genuinely confused about where federal abortion policy is headed now. President-elect Donald Trump has called himself the most pro-life president ever. But he's also said abortion is best left to the states. You know, I think a casual listener could be forgiven thinking maybe abortion's going to kind of fade into the background as an issue on the national stage. Is that how you see it?
Well, that is how I saw it. I wrote a column for the Times at the beginning of 2023 that said, is abortion over as a political issue? And maybe it is. I don't think so now.
Part of what changed Linda's mind is a new legal case just filed. The arguments inside it genuinely shocked her. And it's hard to shock Linda.
People who believe that a fertilized egg has the moral weight of a born person are not going to let go.
Today on the show, how one very old anti-abortion argument is making a comeback. I'm Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around.
Planned Parenthood Federation of America exists so that all people can get access to the sexual and reproductive care and education they need to make informed decisions about their health. More than 2 million patients a year rely on the services Planned Parenthood health centers provide, like STI testing and treatment, birth control, gender-affirming care, abortion, cancer screenings, and so much more. Right now, all across the country, reproductive health care and rights are under attack from public officials who are out of step with the will of the vast majority of Americans. The constitutional right to abortion, control of our bodies, and the health care we need has been stolen from us. And now politicians in 47 states, yes, 47, have introduced bills that would block people from getting the sexual and reproductive care they need. Planned Parenthood knows that equitable access to health care, including safe, legal abortion, is a human right. Right now, Planned Parenthood needs your help to protect access to health care. Donate today by visiting PlannedParenthood.org/protect.
This episode is brought to you by Public.com. Interest rates have fallen, but you can still lock in a 6% or higher yield with a bond account at public.com. That's a pretty big deal, because when rates drop, so can the interest rate you earn on your investments. A bond account allows you to lock in a 6% or higher yield with a diversified portfolio of high-yield and investment-grade corporate bonds. So, while other people are watching their returns shrink, you could be earning regular interest payments. But a yield is not locked in until you invest, so check it out. The good news is it only takes a couple of minutes to sign up at public.com. Lock in a 6% or higher yield with a bond account. Only at public.com/whatnext. Brought to you by Public Investing, member FINRA and SIPC. As of September 26, 2024, the average annualized yield to worst across the bond account is greater than 6%. Yield to worst is not guaranteed. Not an investment recommendation. All investing involves risk. Visit public.com/disclosures/bond-account for more info. Last Supreme Court term, the justices ruled on a case about the abortion pill, mifepristone. The case had been brought by a group of anti-abortion doctors who were trying to overturn the FDA's approval of the drug. But the doctors themselves did not perform abortions. They were arguing they had a conscience injury from widespread access to abortion pills. And the court ultimately ruled these particular doctors did not have standing to bring a case like this, since abortion pills were not causing them a direct injury.
The court unanimously threw out the suit, saying, you doctors, we're sorry you feel this way, but you've got a political problem. You've got to take it into politics. You don't meet the test for standing to get into a federal court.
But in their rejection, the court left the door open for different plaintiffs to try out the same strategy. So in October, 3 states, Idaho, Kansas, and Missouri, filed their own lawsuit against the FDA. And this time, they claimed that access to abortion pills was preventing population growth in their states. This was their concrete injury.
These states have come in and said, we have standing because liberal access to abortion is cutting into our birth rate. And that is a sovereign injury. We are injured in our sovereignty as states if our birth rate is dropping because we might have less representation in Congress. We might have fewer federal dollars flowing to us. That's our injury. We have standing. That's a very extreme and kind of shocking claim. And that's where the thing stands right now. They're before a very friendly federal judge claiming the right to reignite this lawsuit.
You said you read this whole complaint, which is like nearly 200 pages. It's not short. And you said this argument really stopped you in your tracks. Why was that?
I gave it the label of pronatalism, a pronatal argument. What shocked me was not the argument itself. What shocked me was to see it in writing in a federal court in 2024, because this argument against abortion has a long history.
Yeah, can you explain the history? Because I feel like I'm old enough to remember when some conservatives were worried about a population bomb, like an explosion of people. But I know that if you go back further than that, this argument about like we need people having more babies comes up. So can you maybe go back a century and just explain how birth rate has intersected with abortion politics and abortion arguments?
We think of abortion as kind of a standalone issue, right? But actually it's deeply embedded in how society thinks about population, sex, reproduction, the role of women. All those things dictate how we think about abortion at any moment in history. So to go back to the beginning of the country, abortion was not illegal anywhere. And in the first half of the 19th century, in fact, abortion was quite common, increasingly common. Of course, there was no reliable birth control at that time. So women who found themselves with an unintended pregnancy would find their way to an abortion. And abortion was so common, in fact, that the birth rate was declining for a couple of reasons, but free access to abortion was one of them. And the women who were having these abortions were typically married, middle-class white women. So around the middle of the 19th century, as immigration was mounting up in the country, there were some people in society who said, this class of the middle-class white people is not reproducing itself in sufficient numbers to counter this. Sounds familiar, right? It's kind of the great replacement theory.
It's such an ugly argument.
So guess what? The way to make sure women couldn't stop having babies would be to outlaw abortion. And so a movement swept across the country. And by the end of the 19th century, abortion, which had not been illegal anywhere, became illegal everywhere.
Restrictions on abortion and concerns about birth rate ebbed and flowed throughout the coming decades. The conversation really picked up again in the 1960s and 70s.
As I said, abortion really reflects how society thinks about these issues. So in the 1960s, early 70s, there were environmental concerns about overpopulation. Would the world be able to feed itself? That kind of thing.
There was notably a whole book, The Population Bomb, with like a baby on the cover and a
Right.
bomb. It was like, yeah.
Right. The cover of Time magazine. It was a big issue. And even Richard Nixon convened a commission for the, I think, study of population. It was called the Rockefeller Commission. John D. Rockefeller III was the head of it, and very blue ribbon commission. And they studied the issue for a couple of years and came back in 1971 proposing that access to contraception be much wider and that abortion be decriminalized. Now, Nixon was about to run for re-election in 1972, and this was a step too far for him. So he rejected that part of the report. I should also say, to be historically accurate about that, there was also a feeling that the people who were having all these babies were the wrong kind of people. There was a certain eugenic flavor to that concern in certain circles, and we have to acknowledge that. So it's a complicated issue, but it does tell us that abortion doesn't stand alone. It's part of this whole conversation about population. So to see it come back in this pro-natalist form, states saying we are injured in our sovereignty by the fact that women aren't having enough babies. Whoa, that just brought me back to all that history.
After the break, how this pro-natalist argument against abortion is playing out outside the courts. This episode is brought to you by Discover. It's always nice to get more for less. So here's a life hack that can automatically put some extra cash in your pocket. Discover will automatically double all the cash back you've earned on your credit card at the end of your first year with Cashback Match. So you could get some money for this holiday season and get more next holiday season. It pays to Discover. See terms at discover.com/creditcard.
Hey, it's me, the Quenchies. I'm that late afternoon craving you just can't shake. Wait, what's that? Welch's Grape Aid? No! Made with real fruit and no added sugar, nothing answers the call of the Quenchies like Grape Aid. Got the Quenchies? Grab a Grape Aid in your juice aisle.
I want to focus in on the population growth argument because when we look at it, it's explicitly about certain groups of people, right? Like the declining birth rate we're seeing, isn't it a lot of teenage mothers?
Well, that's true, and something that we should be cheering. The crisis of teen pregnancy, which was very much a front page issue 10 or 15 years ago, teenage pregnancy has plummeted. In fact, without immigration, the country would not be replacing itself. Other countries in the world that don't accept immigration, Japan, is having a slow rolling economic crisis because Japanese women are not having babies. So these issues are very much now at the forefront, really around the world.
It's so interesting that you're linking immigration with this argument about birth rates and how important it is to see those things together. Because I do think, um, in addition to this argument in a legal document, we are seeing individuals in the conservative space making the pro-natalist argument. Like J.D. Vance has talked about being concerned about women not having enough children. So I guess how are you seeing this argument in the political sphere different than just the legal sphere?
Yeah, I mean, I think those of us who don't read much on the right, including myself, have been unaware of this pro-natalist meme that is really very prominent in right-wing discourse. The J.D. Vance, the Childless Cat Ladies, was just the tip of a much bigger and kind of darker iceberg. Elon Musk is a big pro-natalist and is, kind of spreading the word about his fear of depopulation.
He also has 12 kids, so he's living this experience.
I think nobody's exactly sure. Maybe he's not sure how many children there are with how many women. So, this is something that's been going on, and it's impossible to extract it from the Great Replacement theory, which, brought us the Proud Boys and brought us Charlottesville and, this fear that the white race is not reproducing itself sufficiently and the country's being overrun by non-white immigrants, ugly, inflammatory stuff. But that's what's going on over there. And so what these 3 red states in this lawsuit are asserting is kind of a sanitized version. But when I read it, it was hard for me to detach it from this, darker version that is very much alive and well on the right wing.
Yeah. I mean, you know what I noticed, which is Florida, of course, had a ballot measure that would have restored abortion rights in the state. But one of the ways that Governor DeSantis and people in his administration tried to make it harder for that ballot initiative to pass is by including a big financial statement on the ballot that basically said, listen, if we're not having more babies in this state, we're going to have decreased tax revenue for Florida. And that's kind of like a mini version of what these states are doing in this lawsuit, where you can see like all of these echoes of this argument, both in the people in the conservative space and then in how they're legally speaking.
Well, yes, and something I probably should have mentioned about this 200-page complaint, a bunch of it is a financial argument saying that I'm kind of laughing as I'm talking because it's so nonsensical. They're saying that women on Medicaid will be having these medication abortions. Of course, the state does not pay for abortion, but they will have complications. They will end up in the hospital, which P.S. is hardly ever true. And we, the state, will have to pick up the tab because these patients will be on Medicaid. And I read that and I thought, wait a minute. If these women on Medicaid don't have abortions but have babies, the state will be paying for the maternal care in the hospital for them to have it. I mean, it costs the state much, much more if they don't have access to abortion and they're forced to carry pregnancies to term. So these financial arguments, both the DeSantis kind and what the states are making to the federal courts, you just really have to look at with extreme skepticism.
We've talked about how you're really unsure what the Supreme Court will do with this kind of argument. And it strikes me that often in complaints like this, lawyers are sort of throwing spaghetti at the wall, like trying to see what argument sticks. And often the argument changes as it rolls through appellate courts and before it gets to the Supreme Court. Do you really think this argument, the pro-natalist argument, is going to last?
It probably will succeed at the district court level. The the trial court level, because these plaintiffs have handpicked a judge. They've handpicked a Trump judge, Judge Kaczmarek, who is the only judge in Amarillo, Texas. And so you bring the case in Amarillo, Texas. This is a judge who was put on the court from the heart of the anti-abortion movement, which he had served as a lawyer. He accorded standing to the doctors in the first round, and he will very likely let this case proceed. It then goes to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals.
The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is notably more conservative than the Supreme Court.
That's right. The Supreme Court has been batting them back pretty regularly. And what's interesting about the Fifth Circuit these days is it's filled with youngish Trump judges, all of whom are running for the Supreme Court, all of whom have their hands up saying, President Trump, look at me, pick me the next time there's a vacancy. So the case may well succeed in the Fifth Circuit, and then it's up to the Supreme Court, and then we'll see.
Just because these arguments are wrong, does that mean the Supreme Court won't take them seriously?
Well, so the threshold issue here is standing, and the states have to show that they are legally entitled to make these arguments. And I'd like to be able to think, so I'll say I think that this is a step too far for at least 5 of the justices. Brett Kavanaugh, Justice Kavanaugh wrote the opinion last June that threw out the doctor's lawsuit. And he said, this is a political issue, and people who don't like this have to take it to Congress. Well, of course, that could happen, as we know. But the notion that the states are injured in their sovereignty by medication abortion, I'd like to believe the Supreme Court will not accept it.
I look at this case and think about the potential of it going before the Supreme Court. And if this argument lasts, the pronatalism argument, the reason why I think it might find some receptive ears at the court is because the case that's being built right now by conservative lawyers and thought leaders isn't simply legal. Like you can see, as we've said, the legal bricks being laid in this case, in that Florida ballot initiative. And then you can also see this cultural argument being made by J.D. Vance and Elon Musk. And it sort of surrounds the justices with a version of this conversation that I just think it might reach them because it's going to reach them in a bunch of different places. Do you buy that?
Yeah, that's a very good observation. This case is not standalone, as you say. It's just part of the unraveling fabric, you might say, of when we trusted the government to regulate appropriately and to do things like increase access to women's ability to control their reproductive destiny. And to the extent that that conversation has shifted so dramatically, the Supreme Court that we have is not impervious to it, that's for sure.
Linda, it's been an honor to talk to you. Thanks for coming on the show. I'm grateful to have you.
Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
Linda Greenhouse is a journalist who has reported on the Supreme Court for decades. And that's our show. What Next is produced by Paige Osburn, Elena Schwartz, Rob Gunther, Madeline Ducharme, and Anna Phillips. We are led by Alicia Montgomery. Ben Richmond is the Senior Director of Podcast Operations here at Slate. And I'm Mary Harris. If you want to, go find me on Blue Sky. I'm at Mary Harris. It's the place where you can hear me talk about all the things that don't make the cut of this final show. All right. Thanks for listening. Catch you back here next time.